The stench hit you first. Old cooking grease mixed with rotting garbage, the perfume of back alleys everywhere. Bruce Lee stopped walking when he noticed the shadows blocking both ends of the passage. 5 men total, 3 ahead, 2 behind. Textbook ambush geometry. The one who stepped forward first stood a full head taller, leather jacket stretched across shoulders built for breaking things. His neck was thick as a fence post, hands heavy as hammers. He carried himself with that particular swagger men wear when nobody's ever hit them hard enough to rewire their assumptions about the universe. "You're the Chinese guy from the movies," he said. Statement, not question. His voice had the flat affect of someone announcing the weather before a storm. Bruce said nothing. His feet adjusted microscopically on the wet concrete. His arms stayed loose, dangling at his sides like empty sleeves. The leader's smile arrived, that specific smile that shows up right before someone decides to hurt you for sport. "I heard you're supposed to be fast," he continued, "but you look weak to me, like every other weak Chinese I've seen." The words hung there, suspended in the damp San Francisco air. One of the men behind Bruce laughed, a short, ugly bark. This was 1964. Bruce Lee was 23 years old, teaching Wing Chun in a cramped school at Chinatown's edge. His student roster was thin. His reputation was growing, but only in whispers. To most of the city, he was just another young immigrant with strange ideas about combat. The gang had been surveillance on him for weeks. They'd watched white students entering his school. They'd heard rumors he was teaching Chinese martial arts to outsiders. In their world, this constituted betrayal. In their world, betrayal demanded punishment. But there was something else underneath, something more personal. The leader, some accounts called him Wong Jack Man, though others would later dispute exactly who stood in that alley, had seen Bruce on television. He'd watched him demonstrate kicks and punches for American audiences. He'd observed the way Bruce carried himself, chin elevated, eyes sharp, body coiled with energy that looked dangerously close to arrogance. It bothered him. It bothered him profoundly. "You teach our secrets to white men," the leader said. "You go on television and perform like a circus animal, and now you walk through this neighborhood like you own it?" Bruce's expression remained unchanged. His breathing stayed even, but something shifted in his eyes, a stillness that carried weight, like water behind a dam. "I teach anyone who wants to learn," Bruce said. His English was precise, accented but clear. "That's not your business. Everything in this neighborhood is my business." The men tightened their circle. The one closest to Bruce's right side had a knife. Bruce had clocked it the moment he entered the alley. The way the man's hand stayed near his pocket, the slight bulge beneath the fabric. "You have a choice," the leader continued. "You close your school. You stop teaching outsiders. You apologize publicly for disrespecting your own people." He paused, letting it marinate. "Or we close it for you." Bruce tilted his head slightly, a small motion, almost imperceptible. "And if I refuse?" The leader's smile widened. "Then we find out if you're as fast as they say." The air between them seemed to compress. Somewhere distant, a car horn sounded. The smell of rain was approaching. What happened next would be discussed for decades, denied, disputed, retold in 100 mutating versions. Some would claim it lasted 3 minutes. Others would insist it was over in seconds. The truth, like most truths about Bruce Lee, would become inseparable from mythology. But in that moment, none of the future mattered. In that moment, there was only the alley, the circle of men standing at its center, perfectly still, perfectly calm, waiting for the first move that would change everything. The leader moved first. Not a punch, a test, a hard shove aimed at Bruce's chest, meant to knock him backward, make him stumble, demonstrate to the others that he was nothing special. His hands never reached Bruce's body. What happened next was difficult for the men to process. Their eyes registered it, but their brains struggled to assemble the sequence into coherent narrative. Bruce hadn't appeared to move quickly. No dramatic wind-up, no telegraphed motion. One moment, the leader's arms were extended towards Bruce's chest. The next moment, the leader was folding at the waist, his breath leaving him in a wet, airless grunt. Bruce's fist had traveled no more than 6 inches, a straight punch to the solar plexus, delivered from a distance that should have been impossible to generate power. The leader's diaphragm seized. His lungs forgot how to work. He dropped to one knee. The alley went silent. The man with the knife reacted first. He pulled the blade free and lunged, aiming for Bruce's ribs, a street move, fast and dirty, the kind that had worked for him before. Bruce turned his body 45 degrees. The knife passed through empty air. In the same motion, his hand found his wrist and twisted. There was a sound like a green branch snapping. The knife clattered to the concrete. The man screamed, a high, thin sound that echoed off brick walls. 2 down, 8 seconds. The others hesitated. This wasn't what they had expected. They'd come for an easy lesson, a public humiliation. They'd come to beat a skinny Chinese kid who taught kung fu to outsiders. They hadn't come for this. Bruce released the man's wrist and let him fall. His eyes moved across the remaining 3, reading their positions, their weight distribution, the tension in their shoulders. He saw fear beginning to form in their faces, that particular kind of fear that arrives when a man realizes he's badly misjudged a situation. "Leave," Bruce said. His voice was quiet. "Take them and leave." The largest of the remaining 3 men, thick-bodied, slow-eyed, shook his head. "You think you can fight all of us?" Bruce didn't answer. He simply waited. The man charged. It was a clumsy attack, fueled by pride and the desperate need to save face in front of his companions. He swung a wide right hook, the kind that worked in bar fights, the kind that could knock a man unconscious if it landed. It didn't land. Bruce stepped inside the arc of the punch. His elbow rose and connected with the man's jaw. Not a wild strike, but a precise, economical motion that used the attacker's own momentum against him. The impact traveled through bone and into the brain. The man's eyes rolled back, his legs buckled. He dropped sideways and didn't move. 3 down, 14 seconds. The 2 remaining men looked at each other. Something passed between them, a wordless agreement. They turned and ran, disappearing around the corner of the alley without looking back. Bruce stood alone. The leader was still on his knees, one hand pressed to his stomach, his face gray with pain. He looked up at Bruce with an expression that had transformed completely. The arrogance was gone. The contempt was gone. What remained was something more primitive, the look of an animal that has encountered a predator it didn't know existed. Bruce crouched down until their faces were level. "You called me weak." His voice carried no anger, no satisfaction. It was simply a statement of fact. "You came to my neighborhood. You threatened my school. You put your hands on me." The leader tried to speak. Only a wheeze came out. "I could have killed you. Do you understand that? I could have collapsed your throat. I could have driven your nose into your brain. I chose not to." He let the words settle. "Remember that choice. Remember it every time you think about coming back here. Remember it every time you hear my name." Bruce stood. He looked at the man with the broken wrist, curled on the ground, cradling his arm and whimpering. He looked at the unconscious man whose jaw would need to be wired shut for 6 weeks. Then he turned and walked out of the alley, back towards the street, back towards his small school where a handful of students were waiting for their evening lesson. Behind him, the leader finally found his breath. He sucked in air in ragged gasps, his body trembling. He had come to teach a lesson. He had learned one instead. The rain began to fall. Word traveled fast. By the next morning, the story had spread through Chinatown like smoke through an open window. The details shifted with each telling. 3 became 5, 5 became 8. The fight lasted 10 seconds or 30 or 2 minutes. But the core remained the same. The young martial artist who taught white students had been cornered by a gang. He hadn't run, he hadn't begged. He'd dismantled them with a speed and precision nobody could fully explain. The restaurant owner who had witnessed the aftermath told his cousin. His cousin told a journalist who wrote for a small Chinese-language newspaper. The journalist told his editor, who decided the story was too volatile to print but couldn't stop himself from mentioning it at a mahjong game that evening. Within 48 hours, Bruce Lee's name was being spoken in rooms he'd never entered, by people he'd never met. Some spoke with admiration, a young man who had stood his ground, a fighter who had defended his honor without weapons, without help, without hesitation. In a community that often felt invisible to the larger city, there was something satisfying in the image of one of their own refusing to be diminished. But others spoke with concern. In a dim sum restaurant on Grant Avenue, 3 older men sat in a corner booth, their tea growing cold. They'd been part of the martial arts community for decades. They'd seen teachers come and go, rivalries flare and fade, traditions preserved and abandoned. They understood something the younger generation often forgot, that reputation was a dangerous thing. It attracted attention, it invited challenges, and in their world, challenges rarely ended cleanly.